looking at the countdown to election 2015. Our guest is incumbent MP for Arima, Rodger Samuel. Good morning, Minister. Thank you for joining us this morning.
How are you doing?
I'm fine, thank you.
See, you're all excited and smiling. And
I was so happy.
Sending kisses to Cleo.
Yes, she's a sweetheart. She's such a, and you see, when you meet her, she's such a humble, beautiful person that you can't help but be happy for her with all her work and sacrifice, and all our athletes for that matter.
It's a lot of work.
It's a lot of work. All right, on to, speaking of a lot of work,
a lot of work.
Let's look at the last 5 years for you. What do you think has been the greatest, your greatest achievements in representing the people of Arima?
Well, obviously, the fulfilling of so many things that Arima had been crying out for years. Obviously, the ultimate of it being the start of the commencement of the construction of the new Arima Hospital, which has been for some 45 years.
45 years?
In the making. I mean, it was promised, I think, in 1971 by then Eric Williams. And Arima has been crying out for that 45 years, over and over and over. What we got after many of the residents began their protests and stuff, we got a sort of glorified health center that deteriorated rapidly because of the construction and the design of the roof. But now, after 45 years, at last.
Given the size of Arima and the number of burgesses and constituents, has grown exponentially since 1970.
It has.
To now. How has the health center been able to cope?
Or
has it been able to cope?
It has not been able to cope because most critical situations and a lot of patients were transferred either to Sangre Grande or to Mount Hope. And that's where the difficulties had been for years. So I remember in 2007 and 2006, there were consultations with regards to the hospital and stuff like that. And I remember being in one of the consultations and asking, because at that time they wanted to construct the idea was to construct a 125-bed hospital. And I was asking, you know, what is the clinical data? What is the data? How many people are being transferred from Arima to Mount Hope or Grande on a daily basis? What's the empirical data that would justify the size of the hospital or the type of hospital that is needed? And it wasn't coming forth at the time. And but now the studies have been done, and as you have said, Arima is expanding. And there are so many cluster communities that are around Arima. And when you talk about Arima, you're not talking about the borough of Arima. Yes. Malabar and Dabadie and all of those areas that are there in Arima. And then the constituency goes as far across to the north coast as Lafayette. So it encompasses Lafayette and Blanchisseuse and all of these areas. That's the constituency itself. So this is a sort of joy for me to have lobbied tremendously hard for the construction of a hospital and to see it started. I mean, I'm tremendously satisfied.
What are the challenges? When we took our cameras to Arima, there's still quite a lot of infrastructure work to be done. A lot has been done.
Yeah.
There's a lot of roads and bridges that have been fixed, but there's still a lot to be done.
Yes. When I took office and we did the entire survey, where I've been working there for some years. I mean, Arima was left undone for decades. There was no development taking place in Arima. Everything was just deteriorating and falling apart. I mean, if you look at the Arima Velodrome that had been constructed many years ago, it needs to be broken down. There is need for new development there, a new stadium or something like that of that nature. And so the list of infrastructural development was long. And I had to now begin to prioritize to see what I can achieve in the first 5 years. And then, you know, by the grace of God, take it to the next level, if possible. And so I had to prioritize. There was the Mount Pleasant situation where the place had fallen away for 28 years. So I had to prioritize in those areas. There's the Blanchisseuse Road that had not been touched for some 40 years. And when I say not touched, the last time anything was done on that 26 miles of road was for about 7 miles, when a prince was coming to Trinidad to visit Asa Wright, so they quickly paved the road and make it look good. but the people were suffering for years. We are now doing 26 kilometers of roads and talking about cutting back the hillsides and widening the roads and drainage. I mean, it's 26 miles of road, and that is going, it's phenomenal. If you see the work on that area, Blanchisseuse Road will no longer be the same.
Because unfortunately, when we did work following the Brasso Circle murders.
Oh yes, so you saw the extent of the work being. That's right. Done, yes.
There are many who will say that looking at Arima, it still has not moved in the direction based on its population and based on its natural gifts to start to move toward economic viability or independence. How would you respond to that?
And I agree with that because one, you've got to look at Arima holistically, dealing with one, not just the physical infrastructure, but the social infrastructure. The harnessing what was then the food basket of the East, and then making it into a viable entity. Not only that, but the Arima sporting fraternity has subsided. I mean, when I went to Arima to live in the early 80s, Arima was bustling with sport. It was a sports center. You get to the Arima Velodrome and even the local football had a packed house. Now it's no longer there. Cricket has subsided. We have produced some of the best cricketers because we have not, over the years, developed the fraternities and the facilities to accommodate the expansion of the sport.
Well, the obvious question is going to come is, what have you done in the last 5 years?
Well, what I have done, what we've been doing, and we've had some difficulty because you remember that a lot of the infrastructure development falls under the Arima Borough Council. And if they don't have the vision for it, then regardless of what you do as an MP, there will always be this issue of challenges. And early in my tenure, I had a company work with me in doing all of the drawings and designs to build a multi-indoor complex because you have 17 schools in my constituency. And when it comes to swimming and other sporting aspects of it, they have to travel out of Arima to do that. Cricketers have to travel out of Arima to play their sport. And
well, why shouldn't Arima's constituents make comparisons? There's a tennis center opening in Tudapuna. There's a cycling center and a swimming center opening in Couva. Why shouldn't the constituents of Arima say, well, you know what, they got, we didn't get?
Right, and that is where the issue is, and they should say that. And but even in the construction or the planned construction of a multi-indoor complex that will have a semi-Olympic-sized swimming pool and indoor basketball and netball, you have difficulties with the borough agreeing to do something like that and saying yes to it. As a matter of fact, when we turned sod for the Arima Hospital, the very said night, you know, in a meeting in Malabar, the mayor of Arima was saying to this meeting, I have instructed one of his staff to now put a stop notice on the hospital because we didn't approve it. I mean all of this nonsense that takes place in the political arena. I mean, wisdom prevailed and they did not, although I wanted him to attempt to do it. But we will pursue. The indoor sporting complex will be constructed. You know, we will pursue vigorously to ensure that it's constructed. The development of the Larry Gomes, what we call the Larry Gomes enclosure, I've always called it the Larry Gomes disclosure because it's not enclosed. How could you call something an enclosure? And Ministry of Sport had budgeted and approved the enclosing of the entire cricket area, developing it into a first-class cricket ground with pavilions and lights so that we can return cricket night and day and stuff like that. That met with some objections by the Arima Borough again. So we have been battling with that issue.
When you go asking for the vote to return you as the MP, that situation will still be there.
It will still be there.
What is going to be different then?
And we're going to have to pursue, and we're going to have to...
Why should they feel anything is going to change with the same formula or the same equation?
Well, we're going to have to lobby. Arima is going to have to lobby and support the ideas and it's to get the burgesses of Arima and the constituents to say this is what we want. And those in authority, the borough council and whoever, will have to agree that this is what the constituents want, what the burgesses want. The difficulties you have is that the borough controls the borough, while the constituency is far wider than the borough. So you have this little battle going on all the time. But I think we can persist and eventually become victorious in the developmental aspects of
Have you
Arima.
not been able to work through the Ministry of Local Government, which has more remit in the Borough Corporation, to some level to get some of these projects going?
We have been to an extent, not to the magnitude that we wanted it to be, but to an extent we have been able to do that.
Let's look also at the last 5 years, which has been a mixed bag. For the People's Partnership, there's been quite a significant level of infrastructure development, legislative movement, roads, bridges, police stations, hospitals, etc. But there's also been quite a bit of controversy. At one point, you kind of pulled back and did a bit of meditation, if that's the correct word. How have you been able to reconcile some of those issues in the last 5 years with your personal convictions?
Well, my personal convictions stand regardless of what. We're living in a multi-ethnic, multi-religious society. We have people with different views and ideas, and they probably see things and the approaches of things differently. As a human being, you have to be able to now work with all and sundry. It will never always be my way or your way, but it can be our way. And that is maturity. Maturity is what must govern the land, and it's not on the basis of if I don't see it, if I don't get it my way, then it's no way.
But in issues such as Section 34, which obviously paid you significantly, life sport, I mean, no government is perfect, but certainly there have been some significant bumps in the last 5 years.
There have been.
In principle.
And I want to let you know that Section 34 was good legislation. Unfortunately, there were ramifications otherwise. It would have helped quite a bit of people in prison who are there for many years. And if they were sentenced now, their sentence is just 2 years, 3 years. Something like that we have to look at. Something we have to revisit. And it's important to do that. Very important.
We're going to take a short break. We're with incumbent Member of Parliament for Arima, Rodger. We'll come back with more after this short break. Good morning, Trinidad and Tobago. Our guest is Minister of National Diversity, Social Integration, Rodger, who's also the incumbent MP for Arima. Let's look at your work in the ministry now. There's a lot of work that's been done. We've seen a lot of reenactment, the Nelson Island experience, yes. Bringing the history of Trinidad and Tobago and the culture of Trinidad and Tobago to the fore in terms of education and awareness as to where we've come from, and also recognizing and acknowledging the works of those who've contributed. Yes. There have been now 16 new sites that have been confirmed? Yes, confirmed. I signed off on those 16 sites on Wednesday, which I want to applaud the National Trust of Trinidad and Tobago for. I mean, they worked tremendously hard. Before they coming into office just late last year, for 13 years of the existence of the trust, only 13 sites were listed. We, in 5 months or 6 months, we have now added another 16. They are now working on another 50 to be added. 50 to be added shortly. I'm sure within the next month. What does that mean for these sites? That one, they are now protected. They are listed as protected sites, and one, they cannot be destroyed. And any work that needs to be done on them has to be restorative work, and it must be in tandem with the National Trust of Trinidad and Tobago. Do you think you've also been able to alert the population as to the importance of these sites historically and also socially? To an extent. The work continues, the education process continues, and we will not cease or stop until the nation embraces fully itself and all that is Trinidad and Tobago. And it's important for us to understand that we have a lot to not only offer the world, but to offer our own selves. And that will instill this sense of national pride and patriotism, and this idea of us protecting who we are and what we have. It must be instilled in the mind and the heart of every individual that abides in Trinidad and Tobago, that this is ours, and we must protect what is ours. Unfortunately, we've allowed some to be destroyed, because we didn't have the mindset to protect it. We have this tendency to believe that progress is the destruction of the past and the embracing of a future. And we didn't realize that we can protect the past and still embrace the future for generations to understand where we have come from and connect with the past the way it should be connected. So we are continuing the education process to educate the citizens. I want to let you know, Paul, that the awareness is growing. People are becoming, and as you said while we were chatting, that the Grey Fire situation also alerted the nation as to our history. Even though at times people feel, why are you going to spend money to preserve that when it can be broken down to build some modern facility? But why break down? Why break the bridges down? Why break those things that connect us? Why destroy who we are and who we were and where we have come from in order to now what? Say that we are advancing. We can advance with all of it. We can make progress with the development of all and make this nation. I came from Cuba. Just recently I visited Cuba. Old Havana is a sight to behold. Well preserved. Sight to behold. I marveled. In our last 5 minutes, let's go back to the politics. How do you think the COP has fared in the last 5 years? There have been also challenges in terms of the relationship with your major partner, the UNC. Do you think it's in a better place now, moving forward to 2015 and the election and beyond? And what do you think will be the significant change in that sort of interaction as coalition partners? First of all, we have stood the test of time. After 27, the nation thought that the COP would have collapsed. I mean, we were the new kids on the block. The other parties had turned all their sights on us to get rid of us, and they did not. We went through our own internal issues. New party, changes of leadership, the dynamics of adjusting and people having their own preferences as to one leader opposed the other, and not having the kind of maturity to stick it through and says, okay, we are developing as a party, you know. We've gone through that. Now we are settled to now move forward.
we have had our issues with our partners, and not just partner, but partners. But we are working that through likewise. Remembering, Paul, that this is the first time in the history of Trinidad and Tobago we have ever experienced what is called a pre-election coalition. Now, we cannot compare it to the NAR. The NAR was a party. It was not a party of parties really per se, but the NAR became a party. Everybody gave up their own identities and became a party. In this setting, everybody maintains and retains their identity. It retains their independent ideologies and philosophies. And we had to now work together to work through the iron out and the blending and the merging of everything. That had taken some time to do, because while we were attempting to do that, we had some serious issues from a governance standpoint. We had economic issues, the fall of the situations in the US. We've had to be on the go from day one. And I commend the Prime Minister, because she has been able to weather the storm in the midst of everything. Being the first female Prime Minister, likewise, not having anybody to fall back on as a female. But I think the COP is now poised to move forward.
Do you think the Prime Minister has been judged as equally as her predecessors?
No, she has not been. I think she has been judged far more than her predecessors. The stuff that her predecessors would have escaped, she has not escaped. But she's a resilient leader, and she has weathered the storm, and she will continue to pursue and persist until the success comes again.
The PNM held a pretty massive meeting this past week. Are you daunted by the size of the amalgamation of the mobilization there?
No. Wait until we hold our meetings again. And then what happened at the meeting in Arima will look like Alice in Wonderland.
In the last 60 seconds, if re-elected in 40 seconds actually, what's your main priority?
My main priority, okay, I need to continue what I've begun, but I want to focus on the social infrastructure of Arima, our young people, the development of all the amenities that will help them develop and grow the way they should grow and the way they should be developed. I want to focus on the sporting aspect of Arima and the aspect of those young people that are slipping through the cracks. I need to have what is called a massive redevelopment center built in Arima, so a lot of the young people that are slipping through the cracks can be redeveloped.
Minister Samuel, thank you for being with us. Much success in your campaign.